Good afternoon, Rotarians. Welcome to the September 25th meeting of the West Jax Rotary. I'm this year's president, Tim Johnson. I want to welcome all of you. Also, welcome our members and others who are joining us via Zoom. I'd ask them to mute themselves, send their questions in via the chat. Today, we're going to begin with an invocation by Rotarian Pierce Gaboni. Pierce, would you mind leading us in the invocation? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please bow your heads. We're grateful, Lord, for the beauty of this day and for your presence with us individually up to this time of Rotary Fellowship. We commit this meeting to you and seek your blessing on the food in our fellowship. Thankfully, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. I don't see Charlie Fetzer in the room, and so I beg your pardon? Is he really? The actual Amsterdam, not Amsterdam, Virginia, but literally Amsterdam? Oh, that's amazing. Is he on? He's not on. Okay, our past president, Dan Dodd, is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Dan, I know you're here. Would you mind leading us? Thank you, Dan. America and the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. All right, it's time for pop-ups. Please take your seats. Do we have any pop-ups today? Gigi is here, our resident celebrity. We haven't seen you on television lately, Gigi. Is that right? I'll jot it. I'll jot it down right now. All right.
And went, run to the door. And I was so happy my husband got that on video. And I got goosebumps right now, still thinking about it. It was the most powerful moment. Like those kids left, those were parents. And teachers left. I had some teachers in there that were newbies. And I've got them booked now. You think about it. So I'm very excited for this club. Because this is the year that we that we make that connection with our interaction so that they can experience something like that from the end during the school year, to the end of the school year, so that we can have that kind of relationship with the
No, that's all right. That's a great pop-up. I'm inspired. Sandra Shank. We'll make sure we get her in here. Excellent. Other pop-ups today. Well, then it's time to win some money. Lee, you're on. We got some money to give away today?
Tim, let me ask you a question, President Tim.
Yes.
Do you know anybody in this Rotary group that likes to play golf? Is there anybody?
Show of hands. Is there anybody who likes to play at least one golf or two? Is Carl Dawkins here? Carl is here.
All right, well, even if you don't play golf, you can have a chance today
Right.
to play golf.
How?
Because what we're going to do is we're going to draw a ticket. And since someone drew the Queen of Hearts last week,
Right.
they get the opportunity to make a hole in one and win the money.
So let me get this right now. So we're going to pull a ticket and then we're going to pull a card.
No.
No.
When they get the ticket, then they got to make a hole in one. And today we collected $130. So they get half of that from just for making a
I
hole
get it.
in one.
So instead of pulling the card, I got it.
Yes.
Is everybody you in the mood for this?
Because someone got the
This is gonna
Queen of
be
Hearts
great.
last week.
Now, just so we're clear, because we got attorneys in the room, you
Yeah,
got to pick
right.
up the putter.
I forgot to draw up the contract.
You got to, exactly. You got to stand behind the line and put
Yes.
it in. Yeah, you can't just walk up and drop it in the.
No. And we have 2 different putters to choose from and 4 golf balls.
All
So
right.
they get their choice.
This is
all right.
going to be great.
All right.
All right, let's do this. Five, 7, 9, 6. Who is it? Is it AJ? Kathy, come on up here. Thank you.
Pick your choice, and then we got a couple of different balls to choose from. Like,
I'm gonna do it.
2, warm up and a try.
one warm up.
2? All right.
There you go. Let me get out of the way.
Can anybody, you all can't even see it, can you?
I can see it up here.
All right.
Whoa, there's a warm
A
up.
little soft.
That was a warm up.
A little soft, all right?
That's the ball again.
Okay, here's.
Whoa. Come on, let's give her a hand. That was great. All right. So how much is in there now?
130. That's of today.
130 as of today. That's great. You know that this goes to fund club projects. It's very important. So I appreciate your participation. Any other pop-ups? Any other raffles? Sir. Wait a minute. Past President Ed Lombard, we got to introduce you, brother. We haven't seen you for a while.
Bisbee and Stephen Rowan, congrats on the football.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, family of Rotary report. I understand that Mike O'Brien is in the house. Mike, come on up here and tell us how everybody's doing.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to apologize to the club. It's been a different month for me. First week, we didn't have Rotary because of Labor Day. Second week, I was on vacation, and then third week, last week, I came back with COVID for the 3rd time. So I do apologize for missing the meeting last week. But so I'm going to cover all the birthdays of our Rotarians. Back in September 7th, Matt Hevener was his birthday. And last week, Frank Shy on the 19th and Dr. Randy Thornton on the 22nd. Happy birthday to all of you. And tomorrow we have Vince Coyle and James McDonald on the 26th. So those are the birthdays. Happy birthday to all. Did I miss? Are there any other announcements, prayer requests, or any other good news to share from the club? Yes, sir. Grandbaby boy. Speaking of grandbabies, this is another great nephew and niece. We're waiting because yesterday morning, my niece went into labor, so they're first. So we're still waiting on the word. So hopefully it's happening right now. Any other news? That finishes my report, Mr. President.
Excellent, Mike. All right, Frank. I know this boy's got a good, strong name. What's his name? Rowan. It's a good name, regardless. It's a great name. All right. Happy birthday to everybody. The introduction of our guests and visiting Rotarians. The maestro is in the room. Do we have anybody? Yeah. All right. Very good.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I hope everyone's getting prepared for the storm that's going to come through and just level Jacksonville. Oh, wait a minute, that was last Friday that was going to happen. But preparation is a good thing. I am happy to say that we do have a member with the guest with them. Scott, where are you? If you'd introduce your guest, please. Ashton, welcome. We appreciate you being here. And we know our speaker is here, and I believe he's got somebody online with him, so I'm not going to take up any more time. Give it back to you, preacher.
Very good. Very good. I'm glad you reminded us this could be the last time we meet. So get a good lunch. You've paid for a year, so let's eat well in case this is the last time we get together. All right. Right now, it's my pleasure to introduce the speaker. Rahul Sharma typically does this. He was unable to be here today. So I'm going to stand in his place, and hopefully I'm going to do as good a job as Rahul would do if he were here. It's my pleasure to introduce a distinguished public servant who has dedicated over 2 decades to the people of Jacksonville and Duval County. I'm talking about Jerry Holland, the current supervisor of elections for the county. Jerry's career in public service began in Jacksonville City Council, where he served as a council member and later as president. He then spent a decade as supervisor of elections, where he worked diligently to restore the trust in our local elections, a responsibility he took on again recently, having been reelected without opposition. Now, in between, Jerry served 2 terms as Duval County property assessor, where he was known for his aggressive stance against exemption fraud. Jerry holds both a master's in education and a Bachelor of Business Administration from the University of North Florida. In addition to his extensive public service, he is a general contractor, real estate broker, and obviously property appraiser, truly a man of many talents. Our members and friends, join me in welcoming Jerry Holland, a steadfast leader in our community and a dedicated fair champion to fair elections. Come on in, brother. Do a good job for us, all right?
I will do my best. Thank you. One, it's a pleasure being here, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about elections. When I came back this time at elections, my colleagues, my other supervisors around the state, they said, you know, Jerry, the first time you got in this in 2005, you didn't know what you were getting into. You actually knew what you were getting into, and you came back. Now, they questioned my sanity, and at times I do too. But I do love elections. It's one of those things that you're like preparing for a storm. You know when it's coming. You know what you have to do. Everybody's looking for a train wreck, and you try to make it through that storm. And so it's an exciting time. I do want to share also, I'm fortunate to be now the longest continuously serving elected official in Duval County of either party. And my wife thanks you. So hopefully we'll do one more term of something. So, but my colleague, who we both served as property appraiser, is now, I don't know if you realize this, the oldest elected official in Duval County is Jim Overton. And I want to give you a big hand. I aspire to be like Jim, you know, and still going that strong at his age. So, you know, thank you, Jim. Yeah, and yours was, you know, not too long ago. It was a big one. It was a big one. But you had already made that birthday, correct? Jim's a good buddy. Elections, you know, I get asked this too. What's different about elections now coming back this time than it was before? In 2005, when I came in, it was still, I call it the hangover from 2000. The 2000 election was the closest election ever in our country's history. It was decided by 537 votes in the state of Florida. At that time, we had a very antiquated voting system. We had, as you remember, the punch card system. There was no electronics. Nobody was worried. It wasn't connected to the internet. It was a very simple, inexpensive system, which, as you remember, you just took an IBM punch card, slid in, and you punched out the races you wanted. Very simple. Unfortunately, if you didn't clean out the little machine occasionally, the chads would get stuck and wouldn't get all the way pushed out, would be dimpled or pregnant or hanging. And therefore, when it got run through several times on recounts, chads would fall out and the counts would change. So after the 2000, really, the elections community and the state embraced technology. And it was like, boy, we don't want that, you know, antiquated equipment. We want technology. Even counties went to all touchscreen voting. There wasn't even paper ballots. Where we've come to now is a complete 180 where we do not trust the tabulation. We do not trust the equipment. We want to go back to hand counting ballots is what people want to do now. I will early retire if we go back to hand counting ballots. If you talk about you want error, then hand count ballots. When you talk about, like in Duval County, we'll have about 500,000 ballots to be cast this November. And you will have 24 different races to count with 92 different selections because some have multiple, you know, races, multiple candidates. It would take probably somewhere around 60 to 70 days to hand count, you know, those ballots. One thing Florida does right now is the way we do our reporting and the way we do our counting. By state law, we're allowed to tabulate the vote by mail ballots once they start coming in. And then also our early votes, we tabulate those. So we're required by state law to report the early votes and the vote by mail ballots by 7:15 on election night. Now at 7 o'clock, many states don't even start counting the vote by mail ballots. And it'll be 2 weeks before they report the vote by mail ballots. If you want to add to distrust or any kind of conspiracy, is have the score being reported, but you're constantly still counting, which is sort of like you're changing the score as you go along. That's where people think there's a lot of distrust. So us doing it as quickly, Florida's pretty much done by 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And the only thing we've got left is in a general election, the military has 10 more days to get their vote in from overseas. And then we have provisional ballots. That's people who have voted at the polls that maybe their eligibility was in question, or they didn't have an ID, or it had said they'd already voted, so they voted provisional, and we go through that process. So really, the accounting for votes and reporting of votes, I think the way Florida does it and reports it so quickly helps us build confidence in the election process. I tell people there is 4 keys to our security when it comes to election. First is the building and the physical building that we house the equipment in and our registration system. We've beefed that up. We've had tours from the FBI, Homeland Security, CISA, the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency, all on how we can be as secure as a physical location as possible. We have added numerous cameras throughout the process. So throughout the process, everything is kind of recorded, what's going on. We have mag locks everywhere you go and limited access to certain places within the office. So the physical location is also very secure. The second part is employees. We do a level 2 background check on all employees, because if someone's going to do something nefarious, it's probably because they have a credit problem or some issue currently in their past that may evolve to a problem. So we do background checks on all the employees that are working in the election process. The third part is the voter rolls, because again, we want to make sure that those who are eligible are those who are on the rolls. Because if you keep people that are no longer living here, if you keep people that are deceased on the rolls, if you keep people that have been adjudicated mentally incapacitated or felons, then what happens is someone can steal their identity and take their place if you've got people who have moved out of the county. There was a big media article not too long ago, just a couple of days ago, about the number of inactive voters. You know, and that's a big misconception of what is an inactive voter. There's three statuses of a voter: an eligible voter, which I hope everybody in here is an eligible voter, an inactive voter, and one that is no longer eligible. So an active, inactive, and ineligible. So your active is you. You basically, to stay active, it's not a matter of you have to vote. That is not a requirement to stay an active voter. In fact, the only requirement is you stay alive and that you want to be a voter, and that when I mail you something, you're there still at that address. So to become an inactive voter is not by your voting how many times. What to become inactive is, I mail you election mail. It's non-forwardable. It comes back to me. Then I send out another letter, and you have 30 days to respond that is forwardable, hopefully going to your new address. And then you respond and update your address. If you don't in that 30-day window, you move from active to inactive. It doesn't mean you can't vote. It just means I don't know where you live. So I don't have to send you a sample ballot because it's going to come back anyway. So you're in that inactive status. So the media and everybody was upset of, wow, we've got 93,000 inactive voters. You know, why did you make them inactive? Well, the law says the rules I followed is why they became inactive. And I'll never forget, I had a state senator one time come to me and he says, I'd like the list of all the inactive voters. I want to reach out and mail them something. I said, if I knew where they live, they wouldn't be inactive. You know, I said, that's why they're inactive. I don't know where they live. Oh, okay. So they said, well, you need to reach out. So we did. We had a suggestion, and we said, we always listen to suggestions. And they said, use the system we do to communicate to poll workers that will basically send out a robocall or a email to, if we have the address, to our poll workers. And it's a service and it's a charge for how many we send out. So we're looking up, and if we have an email address or a phone number, then we will make the call to the inactive, because obviously their home address we don't have. And the council last night appropriated $25,000 for us to do that. You know, the likelihood of the 88,000 now inactive voters are still in Duval County, maybe a couple thousand are, you know, and they could still go vote even if they didn't update their address. It's just they got to go to the right polling location or go to early voting when they go to vote and update their address then. But we will reach out to make sure we can get as many people as possible involved in this election. So that's some of what we do. Again, the voter rolls are very important to make sure. We actually have less voters on the rolls today than we had 4 years ago, because we've been cleaning up the rolls and making sure that people aren't living here and those who are deceased. We're always looking at how we can check our voter rolls. I ran a report, had report of all my voters over 100 years old. Jim, you weren't on it. But yet, but from a standpoint, the purpose was that, yes, you can still vote if you're 100 years old, but we had some people on there that was 122. And the good news is they had not voted in 20 years, but they were still on the rolls. So obviously we removed those after we investigated and went further to make sure they were just that deceased. So you're looking to make sure your rolls are clean. So again, the building, the employees, the voter rolls. The fourth thing is your equipment. You'll hear sometimes the equipment is connected to the internet. It is not connected to the internet. What is connected to the internet is the electronic voter ID, where you check in. They ask for your driver's license, they scan it, it pulls you up. That has to be connected to our internet, to the server, because if you go early vote the first day, you can't go the next day to another early voting site or even that same day or that same hour, because it updates the system immediately and says you've already voted. So we need that connected so we have live data to know that nobody's trying to vote twice. So, but the voting equipment itself, and this is important because you'll hear it can be hacked, or you'll hear it's made in China. It's made in Omaha, Nebraska, but still is in the United States. So it's here. It's homegrown equipment. It's ES&S is the name of the company. And basically there's 4 ways we capture the vote. One is at the end of the night, we print a result tape. We print 2 of them. One of them we post on the door of the polling location, and the other we put in a sealed bag. The next, there's a thumb drive in the equipment. We capture all the votes that day on that thumb drive. It's put in a sealed bag, and it's also then prepared to go back. And then the paper ballots, every vote cast in the state of Florida is on a paper ballot, so we can reconstruct the election. And then the 4th way, now all 3 of those are actually brought back by Jacksonville Sheriff's Office in sealed bags. And so the 4th way is at the end of the night, when those are done, then we have a virtual private network, an encrypted line from our machine to our server, and send an encrypted unofficial results. So even if you could go in that virtual private network through the encryption and change it, you would still have to change the printed result tape, the thumb drive, and the paper ballots. And how would we know? We do an audit afterwards. In the state of Florida, after the election is over, the county judge who's on the canvassing board will randomly select race and precincts. We'll pull those, and in front of the media and the public, we will hand count those selected races and ballots. And since I've been doing elections, they match exactly the same. So if there is something nefarious, it would show up in any of those audits. And that's very important. So that's how we protect your vote on that. So the other thing I wanted to cover is we have 6 amendments on the ballot. Does everybody know everything about all 6 amendments? If not, I can skip this part of my talk. Let me tell you, you got 6 amendments. I'll tell you real quickly from a standpoint is that, I got good time. From a standpoint, 4 of them were put on by the legislature. 2 were what's considered citizens initiatives. From a standpoint, you can tell the difference for a couple reasons. One is if it's a citizen initiative amendment, it will have a fiscal impact statement at the end of the when you read the amendment. Now, even if they can't determine a fiscal impact, it will say we can't determine the fiscal impact, but it will have that statement at the end of the amendment. So 4 of them put on by the legislature, 2 by citizens. How do you put an initiative on the ballot? Well, you have to gather 8% of the number of voters who voted in the last presidential election, which was about 10 million. So a little bit over that. So about 850,000 signatures, valid signatures, had to be collected. To get 850,000, you have to collect about 1.3 million signatures on petitions. So they went through that process for these 2 amendments, amendment number 3 and 4. And then they have to meet the criteria of their ballot being the language being written so that you can understand. And also they have to get the fiscal impact statement. So that's where you have how you get something on the ballot. Now, the legislature can also put something on the ballot. Also, there's the election, not the election, the kind of the state constitution. They'll do that every 10 years and they can put on, that committee does. These are not from that committee. They were on in the last election cycle. But so here's the 6 amendments. Amendment number 1 is to make school board races partisan. Now, that doesn't just make the school board race where you show the party. It changes the dynamics of how you elect. Current day, if you have no matter how many candidates, they all run on the ballot in August, regardless of party, and they do not show party. If someone gets 50% plus 1, they're elected in August. If they don't, then the top 2 vote getters, regardless of party, goes to November. That's what you currently have. If you vote for partisan school board elections, you will see the party and they will run within their party primary in August. So if you have 5 candidates running, 2 are Republicans, 2 Democrats, and an NPA, then the 2 Republicans will run against each other in August. The winner will go to the November election. The 2 Democrats will run against each other in August, and the winner will go to November, and the NPA automatically goes to November. So that's the difference on just the dynamics of how the election will be done. In many ways, they're partisan already. Yeah, that people will obviously run on conservative liberal platforms. There's even a federal case that was won by someone running for school board in the Panhandle that even said you can actually state your party as you run for school board under the option to be able to have free speech. So that's your option. You can decide whether you want partisan school board elections. All these amendments, in order to pass, must get 60% of the vote in the state of Florida. So not just 60% in the county, it could fail in the county, but the overall vote be 60% and it passes. That's amendment number one. Amendment number two is to make hunting and fishing in the state of Florida, to put it in the state constitution that it is a right of citizens in Florida to hunt and fish. You may be saying, was somebody going to take that right away? No, that was not a threat, but this was one of those things. Once we put it in the Constitution, and realize anything that you have an amendment and you put in the Constitution, you cannot change without another amendment. So this was like, all right, we're going to put this in the state constitution. Interesting enough, one of the concerns, and you'll see it in the amendment, is that it does not change any hunting or fishing laws. Some people thought if we put this in, all right, I don't need a hunting and fishing license. I can hunt anytime I want to. I have this right. And they made sure that that is not the case. The laws still apply. You still can only get a red fish in between this size and this size. You can only catch so many red snapper. You can only do so much. So none of the laws changed. It just puts in the Constitution that we have a right to hunt and fish. So one person brought up, and it's interesting, amendments are there for different reasons. I had a meeting I spoke at this week, and they said, basically, they felt the legislature put that on to bring hunters and fishermen to the polls. And that's the same thing that some said Amendment 3 and 4 is to bring certain voters to the polls. Again, that's beyond my level to say that's the speculation why things are on the ballot, but these are things you get to vote for. So again, amendment number 2 is to put in our state constitution that you have a God-given right to hunt and fish in the state of Florida. All right, amendment number 3, this is a citizen initiative, has a fiscal impact statement that says if this passes, the state will generate $165.7 million a year. This is the personal, able to use the personal use of marijuana up to having possession of 3 ounces of marijuana. It does not give you the right to grow it either, because that keeps the ability also to make sure it's taxed. And also is a limited monopoly. You can't just say this would be a great business to get into. It is a licensed business and only a limited number of licenses. But this will give, beyond the medical use that is now, will give the personal use of marijuana to citizens of Florida. What's interesting about this, because of the Clean Air Act, is that the legislature, if this passes, it does not go in effect election night. So for those who may be advocating for it, is that it does not allow them to light up that night. It goes in effect 6 months afterwards if it's passed. And I will be sure there will be some people celebrating that night if it passes, and they will be out of law. So, but from a standpoint, reason 6 months is because with the Clean Air Act, it talks about that you cannot smoke in a restaurant tobacco. You cannot smoke tobacco in different places. Doesn't talk about marijuana. So they have to come back to make sure that it is prohibited in any place that tobacco is prohibited, it's also prohibited. So if it passes, the legislature can put that into law. So that's the next step of it if it does pass. So again, that's amendment number 3, citizen initiative. They tried to talk about, fiscal impact being, will have an impact to workforce productivity, traffic acts, but no one could codify if workers are getting higher or something of this nature, or people on the roads, will it cost more they did not put a cost on that. They only put a fiscal impact to the tax benefit if it's passed. So that's amendment number 3. Amendment number 4, another citizen initiative. It will say on the bottom, no fiscal impact. They tried to determine, this is the one to change the abortion law from 6 weeks to viability. They tried to even express in the comments on fiscal impact Would it reduce the population of the state, which could reduce tax revenues? But they tried and that didn't go anywhere. So, so basically it'll say no fiscal impact, but it does change. In other words, our state law today is 6 weeks for abortion, except for medical reasons or, life of the mother, rape or incest is the current law. This will take it to viability. Questions have come up. Where is viability? Again, this will be something decided in the courtroom, probably in some times, when that is. But that, again, one of the controversial amendments, but again, will be an amendment for you to decide on this election. Amendment number 5, which is one that Jim or I could both discuss. It is about your second homestead exemption. In other words, you have one homestead exemption, which is the first $25,000 of value. And that one, it is not touching because that one also is an exemption of school board taxes. This is the second $25,000 that you have, which is basically on your municipal ad valorem taxes. And what this does is says in that second $25,000 of exemption, which is homes value between $50,000 and $75,000 or more, which everything qualifies for that one, is pretty much there will be an inflation marker such that it will grow with inflation. So as the consumer price index grows, then that 25,000 exemption will grow. Don't get too excited. Had this passed 10 years ago, and I went back and looked at the CPI for each of the last 10 years, that $25,000 exemption today would be $32,500, and you would save $80 on your taxes. But again, it is the legislature saying, once again, we're trying to fight your inflation. So if you want that, you can vote for the inflation fighter for your second homestead exemption. And that is your choice. So the last one is amendment number 6. This one is about public financing of 4 statewide positions, which is the governor, the chief financial officer, the ag commissioner, and the attorney general. In those races, they get matching funds. If they, in their campaign account, limit certain amounts and they get matching money from the state. Over the last 2 times, 8 years ago, it was 10 million they had funded. 2 years ago, rather, for the gubernatorial race cycle, it was about 12 million. So Senator Travis Hudson said, we could use that money better instead of giving to the candidates. So you have the right to appeal that public financing. It was put in originally because it felt like if we could cap races as they race for these, then maybe it would make elections fairer and everybody would be more on plane. The only thing that's changed when this was put in the 90s is the amount of money that goes now into political action committees. So you've got your candidate money and you got your PAC money. It's unlimited. So it doesn't prevent that. In reality, most of the time in these big races, the PAC money will be sometimes as much as 10 times the amount they're spending on the campaign versus their candidate money. But again, so from that standpoint, you can say no more public financing of these races. I will say this was put on the ballot in 2010, but it failed. So you have a second chance at it if you want to take away that public financing of those particular races, matching funds for those races. So at that point, right on time, questions? Yes, sir, Ed.
Thank you, Jerry. 2 questions. On Amendment 1, by it being partisan, it would limit independents from being able to vote in the primaries, correct?
Yes. In other words, the way that works is in the state of Florida, we have closed primaries. The way it's open is, let's say in a particular race, they were all Republicans running in a certain district. That would be an open primary. However, what you'll see that you don't see today is a write-in candidate will come along and say, I want to be a write-in candidate. And if you have a write-in candidate, they show up on the November ballot, which means if you have someone in November, you close the primary. So it could be open, but in most cases, what they do is there would be a write-in, they would close it. So yes, if, in that case, what could very well happen is if you had all of one party, they put a write-in in, then only that party would be voting in August. Now the write-in, which doesn't even have to go to November after the election in August and say, I thought about it, I don't want to be it anymore. they drop out and there's your winner and nobody else voted for them but that party. Good point.
Second question on Amendment 3, there is no limitation, as I understand it, as far as being able to smoke pot in a public area, not in a restaurant or anything, but like on the sidewalk. So that's potentially we're going to have secondhand smoke, pot smoke.
They really will have to define where, right now we've got, and it gave each county the option that we have no smoking of tobacco products in parks or at the beach. So there are places where that has been a limitation to tobacco. They can make a limitation to marijuana. But in the same way, if someone's on their back porch and the smoke is blowing over to your porch, don't inhale.
Thank you.
That's what they would tell you.
Joe Everly has a question.
Going back to the first part of your comments about having to count every ballot, hand counting, would you care to speak at all to what Georgia has just done?
I think, in case you don't know, the election board in Georgia, which they have an election board over the whole state, it's kind of our Secretary of State in Florida is over the divisional elections. We're a little bit different than Georgia. But their board voted to hand count ballots on the precincts, which is what many people are asking for. We just got an email from a group asking the city council to do that. They have no authority to, nor do I. It's a state level. I think we'll really see a nightmare from an election perspective, because again, they'll use the example of hand counting ballots of France hand counts their presidential election, but they only have one race at a time. They have a minimum or a maximum of 1,000 voters per precinct. If we had 1,000 voters per precinct, I would need 640 precincts. I have 160. So if you use that example, you'd have to change your model of elections. And the other part is, are they going to hand count everything on the ballot? Because they will also have state representatives, state senators, municipal races, all those things. I think they're looking for a train wreck. The problem will be, even last time, Georgia had the problem where they were counting ballots. They stopped counting. They started again. This is going to be something we predict could take them weeks to come up with the results. And they're a swing state.
Jerry, since I think I heard you say, unlike a union vote, we can't vote early and vote often. When will you send out, the ballots to the House? And then second part of that is, when you put them there and the mailman takes them away, how do we find out if they got received and counted?
Okay, let me give you a couple dates while we cover the whole calendar here. Last week, we sent out the overseas ballots. So you have to go out 45 days before. We'll send out the domestic ballots September 30th. Last day to register to vote is October 5th. Sample ballots that we send out to every voter is going to be on October 18th. And early voting will start October 21st and go to November 3rd. To your point on the ballots, as you talked about, they will be going out September 30th. One thing I want to say as we talk about sample ballots, we have a choice. We can send a sample ballot per household or per voter. It's more expensive per voter, but the reason we do this is this. This is a very long ballot that you're going to have. It is 17 inches long front and back. If you're at Atlantic Beach, they have got another page because they've got some more amendments. So does Jacksonville Beach. It is a ballot you do not want to go into the polls for the first time to look at. You want to take your sample ballot, read through, make your selections, bring your sample ballot in with you and make those selections. The other thing I will promise you, if you wait to election day, and a lot of people like to traditionally vote on election day, you will be waiting in line on election day, because we had to reduce to a lawsuit our precincts last year from 186 to 160 because we had different amount of polling locations. It was a lawsuit before I came in office. In some districts, we had 19 city council districts. We had 19 polling locations, as some as few as 8. Under equal protection, there was not equal access to voting. So we had to find a happy median where we could have enough precincts, and it was 11. So there's no more than 12 or no less than 10 voting locations in each. So you've reduced 26 polling locations for election day. And so if you wait till election day, be patient, bring your sample ballot, Bring your lunch because vote early, not often, but vote early. It will save all of us a lot of headaches.
Jerry, I'd like to say thank you for explaining the amendments. I've been seeing a lot of ads that terrify me one way or the other, so it's pretty useful going into the polls.
Well, thank you.
But amendment number 2, I think that's the one for the right to fish and hunt. That's really confusing to me. Why would they put that on there if it doesn't have any sort of bearing either way?
Well, you make a good point because there are certain changes that have to be an amendment. Anything related to elections have to be an amendment. The legislature can't change term limits or do things. Anything related to ad valorem taxes has to be an amendment, as is amendment number 5. And amendment number 6 with the funding on those elections. But this is, in other words, it's just the legislature saying, current law allows you, but we just really feel good about it. We want to put it on there, and they have the right to do that, you know. And then you got that motivation. Is it to bring certain voters to the polls? I don't know if that's the case, but and a lot of things you also can ask. Amendment number 3, amendment number 4 don't have to be amendments. If the legislators thought it was something they want to do, they could make both of those changes. So it gives the citizens that option when the legislature doesn't want to do it, you know, and then also it gives the legislature options when probably none of the citizens were planning on doing it. Jim.
Hey, you bring up the Georgia case, and I think it's a good one. Don't you think that the inability of Georgia to conduct elections in Pennsylvania and a few other states where they had these long count days and so forth, that it will create more demand in Congress for a national system of voting, as the current president has proposed?
Well, in many ways, election officials would like to see consistency. There are some states that have modeled Florida. We think we have a good model for that. The difficulty is this. It's the same scenario where, you know, you'll hear one group wanting to do away with the Electoral College and one wanting, you know, and do popular vote. However you win, that group wants to keep it the way it is. Doesn't matter which party, because, hey, let's not change it. I got elected. You know, if we change it, we may not be in power. Doesn't matter which group. So the likelihood that we could get it across the board, it is a state's right how they do the elections. And believe me, some of them truly need to be updated. You know, Alaska is not on electronic voter check-in. So at the end of election, they have to wait till they're still on, remember the paper registers we used to do? Well, we'd scan those to give you credit. They still do that system. So they have to get them all back in, scan all those to give credit, and then count the vote by mail ballots. Technology would help them speed up that process. I would love to see it, you know, but that is the most contentious part of the parties, is trying to figure out what election laws benefits one versus the other. You know, good question though. Well, after this election, that's not what you were asking, was it? After this election is the gubernatorial election in 26. I'm not going to go there yet. That's a good question. I will run for one more thing. That's what I'll leave it that. I'll leave a mystery on that one. So thank you.
Let's hear it for Jerry Holland.
Thank you.
I got a couple of questions. Is that all right?
Oh, absolutely.
Come on up here.
Okay.
So first of all, I challenge that first statistic you gave. You said you've won more elections than Jim Overton? Is that
No,
what you said?
I am the longest continuously serving.
Is that right?
I've had a break in service there.
See, I heard that he was elected like class president in kindergarten, and he liked it so much, he's been running for office ever
yeah.
since.
Hey, he's my role model. He's the best. Okay.
And he's a member of our club.
Yes.
All right, couple of questions for you. You hear about predictions. Do you do predictions of voter turnout?
Yes. And that's something the media will always ask us, is what is the turnout going to be? And quite honestly, it reminds me, I coached baseball for 5 years in high school level, is that it's analytics, it's studies, and the way you predict that is how the player performed before, you know. So what we look at is we look at the dynamics of the race. Is it an incumbent? Is it an open seat? How did it same perform 4 years ago? How are your voter rolls? In other words, if you clean them up, you get a higher percentage, because if you've got people on there that's not going to vote, but I count them in my statistics, I'm going to have a lower turnout. So with all that being said, for this presidential, we think between 75 and 80%. which is about 4 points higher than it was in Duval County in the previous presidential.
You know, I've heard that it's difficult to recruit and retain poll workers. Can you comment on that?
Yeah.
Is it a challenge?
Well, I tell you, one thing is, a lot of our poll workers are our age. And not only do they retire again, they also pass away. And so we're constantly recruiting poll workers. And the other bar that I set in Duval County is the law says that in every polling location, they cannot be all of one party, but you can have one person of another party. But it's not the major party. It can be an MPA. It can be a Green party. It can be whatever party you want. We set the bar a little different in Duval. We said in every polling location, there'll be a minimum of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. What was interesting is I had 2 legislators to put that forward for the other counties. I did not get one supervisor of elections to support that in the entire state. So, but we do, and it made our recruiting a little more difficult. I will say Democrats are very good about volunteering for poll workers. My Republicans weren't as good. So we had to really get out there and encourage them to say, listen, don't after the election say something was done wrong. Be part of the process. And that's why I want both parties involved all the way throughout the process. So at the end of the day, I don't have fingers pointing going, well, if we'd been there, it would have done right, no matter who the party is that wasn't there. So
I want you to take this as a small token of our appreciation. Thank you for being our speaker. One more time, Jerry Holland, let's get a picture. Outstanding, outstanding, outstanding. All right, everybody, we're at the end of our meeting. I wanted to give a special thanks to our banquet manager, Tiffany, and her staff. They always do a great job for us. Katie Quackenbush and Dan Dodd were our greeters today. Pierce, I appreciate you with the invocation, an outstanding invocation. Charlie wasn't able to be here. Dan Dodd, past president, stepped in, and I appreciate that. Mike O'Brien, I hope you're feeling better. You look good. Thank you for being here. And Jerry Holland did a great job. Ashton, thank you. Come back again. We'd love to have you as a member. Please don't be shy. Visit us again. All right, our future meetings on October 2nd, we have our evening social. It's going to be at Kickbacks. There's going to be no lunch that week. It's a great, unique venue, lots of beer options, and we've got a special night planned for you, so please be there. On October 9th, our speakers are Jake Gordon from Downtown Vision, Inc., and Lindsay Ott, and they're going to talk about the future of downtown Jacksonville. It is now time for the four-way test. I believe that past president and chairman emeritus of the Table of Sin, Jimmy Kelly, is in the house. Jimmy, are you in the mood to do the four-way? All right, sir. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Let's go out and make some magic. See you next week.